I thought my husband wasn't enough for me, until I realized no one else is either. The wine glass was almost empty, but the weight in my chest felt as full as ever. I stared at the dimly lit restaurant, watching couples laugh and lean into each other. Across from me, Ethan sat scrolling through his phone, oblivious to my silence. We had been married for 8 years, and somehow, our once electrifying connection had faded into this, polite exchanges, forgotten anniversaries, and a yawning distance I didn't know how to bridge. "Are you even listening to me?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. He looked up, startled. "Sorry, what?" "Never mind." I sighed and waved it off, pushing my half-eaten plate away. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. It wasn't that Ethan was a bad husband, far from it. He was stable, kind, and dependable. The kind of man any woman would be lucky to have. But as the years went on, I found myself wondering if lucky was enough. I missed the passion, the thrill, the sense of being desired in a way that made my skin buzz. Lately, I couldn't help but fantasize about a life beyond the one we had built, a life where I felt truly alive again. That's when Julian entered the picture. Julian was everything Ethan wasn't: bold, unpredictable, magnetic. We met at a networking event for work, where his easy charm and confident smile made him the center of attention. He was the kind of man who could make you feel like the only person in the room, and I was no exception. "So, do you always look this serious, or is it just for tonight?" he teased, handing me a glass of champagne. I laughed, caught off guard. I didn't realize I looked serious. "Oh, you do," he said, leaning in slightly. "But there's something intriguing about it. Makes me wonder what's going on behind those eyes." For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as a wife or a mother or a coworker, but as a woman. And it was intoxicating. The messages started innocently enough, casual texts about work, jokes about the dullness of corporate events. But soon, they turned into late-night conversations that blurred the lines of friendship. "Do you ever feel like something's missing?" Julian asked one night as I sat in the darkened living room, Ethan asleep upstairs. "Sometimes," I admitted, my heart racing. "But I don't know what it is." "I think you do," he replied. "You just don't want to say it." His words hung in the air, both thrilling and terrifying. For weeks, I carried them with me, even as guilt gnawed at the edges of my conscience. I knew I was playing with fire, but part of me didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt desired, alive, wanted. "Who are you always texting?" Ethan asked one evening as we sat on the couch, the glow of the TV flickering between us. "No one," I said too quickly, shoving my phone into the cushions. He raised an eyebrow. "It doesn't seem like no one. Are you spying on me now?" I snapped, instantly defensive. "Spying?" "No," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I feel like I'm losing you, Claire." The vulnerability in his tone cut through my anger, and for a moment, I considered telling him everything. But instead, I said, "You're not losing me. I'm just stressed." It was a lie, and we both knew it. The first time Julian kissed me, I didn't stop him. We were standing in the parking lot after a late meeting, the air thick with the tension that had been building between us for months. His lips were warm, his hands firm on my waist, and for a brief, dizzying moment, I let myself believe that this was what I had been missing. "I've wanted to do that since the day I met you," he whispered, his breath hot against my skin. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The guilt was already crashing down on me like a tidal wave, but I couldn't deny the spark that had ignited in my chest. It was exhilarating. Addictive. For weeks, I lived a double life, dutiful wife by day, reckless lover by night. Julian made me feel alive in a way Ethan hadn't in years, and I convinced myself that I deserved it. But as the affair deepened, so did the cracks in the fantasy. "Why haven't you left him yet?" Julian asked one evening as we lay tangled in hotel sheets. "It's not that simple," I said, avoiding his gaze. "Isn't it?" he pressed, his voice tinged with frustration. You can't have it both ways, Claire. Sooner or later, you're going to have to choose. I hated how right he was. But the thought of leaving Ethan, of tearing apart the life we had built, felt impossible. It all came crashing down one evening when Ethan found a series of texts on my phone. The look on his face when he confronted me will haunt me forever. Is it true? He asked, his voice trembling. Are you cheating on me? I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. The silence was deafening. How could you do this? He asked, tears streaming down his face. I gave you everything, Claire. Everything. I'm sorry, I whispered, the weight of my actions suffocating me. I didn't mean for this to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen, he repeated, his voice rising. You made a choice, Claire. Over and over again, you chose him. Julian, for all his charm, wasn't the savior I had imagined. Once the thrill of the affair wore off, I began to see the cracks in him too, his selfishness, his inability to commit, his habit of deflecting blame. The passion that had once felt so intoxicating now felt hollow. Why are you being so distant? Julian asked one night as I sat silently across from him at dinner. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe this isn't what I thought it would be. He frowned, his jaw tightening. So what, you're going to run back to him? Pretend none of this ever happened? No, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I can't do this anymore. In the end, I lost both of them. Ethan filed for divorce, and Julian moved on to someone else, leaving me alone to grapple with the wreckage of my choices. For months, I spiraled, questioning everything, blaming everyone but myself. But as time passed, I began to see the truth. I wasn't unhappy because Ethan wasn't enough, or because Julian wasn't the right person. I was unhappy because I had been searching for fulfillment in others instead of finding it within myself. Now, as I sit in my small apartment, I sip my coffee and stare out the window. The scars of my mistakes are still there, but so is a quiet sense of clarity. I thought my husband wasn't enough for me, but the truth is, no one else could be either, at least not until I learned to be enough for myself. And that, I'm finally starting to believe, is the hardest and most important lesson of all.